Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
See me by the river, praying over storms. It's hard to let go of the things I think I need. And if I lose my vision, may I use your eyes to see just where it is I need to be. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. It's made a life of standing in the way of all the beauty this world has worth knowing. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. Truth will keep on shining like the morning sun, brighter than troubled winds can blow. And if you lose your vision, you can use my eyes to see just where it is you need to go. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. It's made a life of standing in the way of all the beauty this world has worth knowing. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. And oh, we're finally free to know the gravity, but we can overcome, we can overcome, we can overcome, we can overcome. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. It's made a life of standing in the way of all the beauty this world has worth knowing. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. Oh, pride won't get us where we're going. It's too far to walk alone. You can't do it on your own. It's like bare hands digging through stone. And if things go down much steeper hills, even money won't pay these bills. But time is sure to show the People gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay. They just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, there are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. Sometimes feels like I'm drifting a million miles from this planet. But what a shame it would be to look back on my life and realize that I've taken you and you for granted. People gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay. They just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, there are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And I can't see what's a mile around the bend. I do not know where this world is headed or where it may end. But you gave me this smile, so I threw away my frown. And I ain't gonna pick up, no you don't pick up what you just put down. People gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay. They just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, there are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. Are people gonna be okay? Storms never come to stay. They just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, there are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And I need you more than I'll let it show. And you need me more than you know. We can walk one single mile alone. I need you so long.
Hey everybody, came out here, neighbors decided that was the moment, we're gonna do the leaf blower. So I think she's done now. So just a change of scenery for a handful of announcements today. And by the way, handful is among the proper breakdowns of announcement portioning. There's handful and then there's several. I think after that there is we had to cut a song to fit the announcements in. So this is a handful. First, in partnership with Dorcas Ministries, Crosspointe is going to be participating in a food drive at church on next Sunday, on the 13th. They're an amazing organization. They're a very real lifeline to a lot of people in the area. And so we are honored, as always, to participate in their success. Go to crosspointe.org/events, and you'll see there what foods are most needed. It's not just whatever you can grab. They're very specific about what they're using. Like you'll see on the list boxed pasta that isn't macaroni and cheese or spaghetti, and then things like baking goods and canned meat. It's all there on the website to guide you. So I hope that you'll be able to participate in that. Next, I want to remind you to come celebrate the publication of Jeff Chu, our teacher in residence, and his new book, Good Soil: The Education of an Accidental Farmhand. That's next Sunday also, the 13th at 3 p.m. Jeff's going to be joined in conversation by New York Times bestselling author Emily P. Freeman, as well as a special musical guest, John Lucas. It's going to be a great time. Also, Quail Ridge Books will be there. If you want to buy a book, you can buy a book from them. Same page on our website to RSVP. We'd love to know that you're coming. Just go to the page under where it says Good Soil, the title of Jeff's book. Next up in our handful of announcements, a really important event that we've been looking forward to. We are taking a day trip to the International Civil Rights Center and Museum in Greensboro on Saturday, April 26th. We'll be leaving that Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and carpooling to Greensboro, where we will be part of a guided tour from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. That tour is going to include the restored original diner, the lunch counter, the actual location, as well as other interactive exhibits. So it should be an amazing time with some good conversation afterward. So if you want to know more about that and how to register, go to our events page again, crosspoint.org/events, and look for that day trip. I also want to remind you, Easter Sunday is coming, Resurrection Sunday. It's on the 20th. We're very much looking forward to being with you that day and celebrating with you. If you've not made note of this yet, please make note of this. There will be 2 identical services, one at 9 a.m. and one at 11 a.m. You need to register, or it's very helpful if you register for tickets, so that the services are even. They're neither is under or over attended. The tickets are free. This is just a really simple way for you and I to collaborate with several hundred people to make sure that it goes well. So go to crosspoint.org/Easter and get a free ticket for everybody that will be in the main room for you. Perhaps an important point there is that there will be regular Sunday programming on Easter Sunday for children ages from infants all the way to 8th grade. But there won't be anything separate for high school students. So high school students can just be in the main room with the adults. So you want to get a ticket for everybody that'll be in that main room. Also, you might want to note that on a typical Sunday, the first 10 minutes of the service that starts at 10 o'clock is for reflection, and there are interactive elements, decompression, all that stuff. That's part of the programming on a given Sunday. But on Easter Sunday, that 10 minutes won't be there. So we will be jumping right in at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. So you'll want to get there and get your coffee situated accordingly. Okay, we're looking forward to seeing you. Finally, one more before I'm required to say this was not a handful. This was several announcements. Thank you to all you who financially sustain Crosspointe, this organization, and the work that it does. If you've not started and you would like to, go to crosspoint.org/contribute, and there you'll find a handful of ways you can financially support and sustain this community and its effort and participate that way. All right? So thanks, everybody. Peace to you.
So in Jesus' most well-known series of teachings, Jesus finds himself up on a hill, speaking to an incredibly diverse group of people with all sorts of different social, economic, and religious statuses. And in this teaching, Jesus starts out with, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who are meek, for they will inherit the earth." And pretty quickly, we find Jesus trying to honor and include a wide variety of people. And in doing so, he starts to raise the bar on people by actually challenging them to deal with and the condition and the motivations of their own heart. Like when he says, "You've heard it said, do not murder, but I tell you, don't even let contempt grow in your heart towards someone, because it's toxic and it's destructive for you and for others." And so Jesus walks through these different kinds of ideas, but then he says something that has catalyzed a lot of misunderstanding through the years. It's catalyzed a lot of religious shame and often a very distorted view of how we see God and how we see ourselves. When Jesus says this line, Matthew chapter 5, verse 48, he says, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Now here's the thing, right? That's not just a high bar. That would seem to be the highest possible bar, right? It's perfection. A bar that we all know we fail to reach, and yet, because it appears we're commanded to be perfect, we can find ourselves resolved to carrying around this sense of shame and disappointment all the time. Because we know we don't ever measure up to that standard. And the reality is, nothing about that feels like good news. And yet, Jesus, over and over again, insists that he came to offer good news. And so there's a disconnect somewhere there, right? And that's what I want to explore with you today. Now, through the years, this is an idea we've teased out in different ways. I first heard it from author Rob Bell probably like 15 years ago. And through the years, I circle back to it because it's one of those things that just regularly comes up when I'm having conversations with people about their life. And these new ideas and insights keep kind of spinning off of it, and new ramifications for what it means for how we see ourselves and how we see God keep coming up in these conversations I have with people. And so I want to explore some of those with you today. So again, Jesus says, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, when this sentence stands on its own, out of its context, again, it's naturally intimidating and deflating because instinctively we know it's not possible. But as always, context is critical, right? Whenever we hear a statement from Jesus that gets isolated, that gets ripped out of its context and placed on people. And so let's back up a few sentences here and let's look at the context that this phrase gets mentioned in. So back up a few sentences. Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 5, starting with verse 44. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, a couple things worth noting. The original word in Greek that gets translated into English here as perfect is the Greek word teleos. Now, one way to understand the nuances of words when they're used in other languages is to look at how that same word gets translated in similar contexts. So for example, I want us to notice how the word teleos is used in other places throughout the New Testament. So Paul writes this later on in Philippians 3, verse 15. He says, all of us who are mature should take such a view of things. And Paul uses that same word teleos here, and it gets translated as mature. In another letter from the Bible, the letter to the Hebrews, the author writes, but solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good and evil. So again, teleos is translated as mature. And so this same Greek word sometimes gets translated in English as perfect, but other times it gets translated as mature. And then what we find in other literature, both inside and outside of the Bible, is this same Greek word gets translated as complete or whole. And so whenever you have lots of different English words that can be used for one Greek word, we have to try to understand what's being said in the context where it's written. And in this case, in this specific teaching Jesus is giving, Jesus is saying this, right? Love people, all people, even your enemies. Because if you only love those who agree with you, only those who think how you think, believe what you believe, what's unique and compelling about that? Jesus says everybody does that. But then he says, but a mature kind of love, a teleos kind of love, the kind of love God has, is one that actually values, serves, and loves everyone. Therefore, Jesus is saying, be mature, be complete, be whole in how you love. Don't just do the lazy half of loving people, which is loving those who are easy to love. Seek to love and value everyone's life, even if they don't agree with you or are against you. Now, obviously that's important context, right? Because again, how it's often presented is this statement from Jesus that gets ripped out of context, and the proclamation becomes this command of holiness. Be perfect, therefore, just like God is perfect. That's your job. That's the expectation. And anything less than that is a disappointment, and you're a disappointment. And so as a result, what many of us have been handed is a filter of the goal for our lives is perfection. That is what Jesus and God is calling us to. Now, the reality is, there can be some good and healthy things that come from the idea of perfect, right? There's moments that we look back on, experiences that we look back on and think, man, that was perfect. And we use it as a synonym for words like beautiful and priceless. There's some aspects of excellence and a healthy drive to get things done right that can be pursued under the banner of wanting things to be perfect. And again, that can be good and healthy at times for organizations and systems in the process of creating. But there's also an unhealthy view of perfection, right? This destructive shadow side that can filter into the way that we see the world, the way we see ourselves, the way we see circumstances around us. And it can wage war against joy and rob each of us of joy in all sorts of different ways. And unfortunately, this shadow side of perfection is a filter that's often been handed to us by religious communities, where it comes across as, be perfect as God is perfect. And the end result is, the perception we end up having of God is one where God's attitude toward us is constantly one of disappointment, where we just don't and can't ever measure up to perfection. So we have this picture in our head where God looks at us with this perpetual metaphoric posture of these folded arms and just being let down, shaking one's head that we failed to live up to expectations yet again. Now, before we go any further, I think it's important that we address a common misconception that many of us were handed or that we assumed from certain religious contexts. And it goes all the way back to the first stories of the Bible that we find in the book of Genesis about the creation of the world. Now, side note, as we've talked about many times before, these creation stories are written as poems in Hebrew. They weren't written as scientific literature, but rather as poems. And poetry can still be very true, even when it's never intended to be taken literally. Yet still, many of us were handed this religious narrative or carry with us this assumption that everything in the beginning was perfect. That before the so-called fall of man or sin entered into the world, everything was perfect. And therefore, the goal of the life of a Christian is to get back to that state of perfection somehow. But here's the thing. In the poems, it never says that God said it was perfect. Not once. Rather, over and over again, what we find is that God called it good. It says God created the land and the seas and the sun and the moon and the stars, animals and human beings, and God looked at all of it and saw that it was good, which is the Hebrew word tov. God saw that it was good. This was God's observation from the beginning. And what's critical for us to embrace is that good is very different than perfect. Because you see, perfect can carry with it this idea of pristine and flawless, where it's exact, that there's nothing that can be improved upon. But good has room for messy. Good doesn't require that everything be spotless and immaculate. Good has room for stumbles and growth and change. But perfect represents this ideal in our mind. By its very definition, it's unchanging. There's no growth. It's just static. And the thing is, that's just not how life works. Instead, the truth of the matter is, that's actually how we define death, not life. And so what we have to wake up to is that good is what you and I are after. That good is where life is. That pursuing good is what we're invited into, not perfection. And what I'm discovering more and more is that filter is so critically important for the stories that we choose to tell ourselves. There's an ancient prayer found in the Hebrew Bible in the book of Deuteronomy that Jewish people have been reciting for thousands of years, every morning and every evening. It's called the Shema. And it reads this way: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. So one question that naturally comes up is, okay, so what does it mean to love God with all your heart, soul, and strength? I mean, really? Does it mean with every ounce of love that I have? And how do I know if that's happening or not? I mean, how does anyone really know or measure that? And for whatever reason, it's that last word of the Shema, with all my strength. that creates some rather intimidating pressure. It's almost like when you see people who are in a crisis situation with a rush of adrenaline can muster incredible strength, like even lifting a car that they otherwise would never have been thought was possible. That's what kind of we have in our mind. And so therefore we read that. It's almost like no matter how hard we try to love God, which, important to note, right? Jesus says the best way we love God is to love people, right? But still, no matter how hard we try to love God and how hard we try to love people, it's going to typically feel like we're just falling embarrassingly short of doing it with all of our strength and all of our might. And so as a result, the assumption we can find ourselves carrying around is something like, I guess I'm just not a very loving person. I mean, I wish I was, but I'm just not. And then we come across like a Mother Teresa type person and we assume, yeah, I'm definitely not a very loving, kind, or generous person. Compared to her, like, no way. But again, this is where language is so nuanced. In this ancient prayer, the Shema, the original Hebrew word is the word miod. Now, the word miod is a word that's used over 300 times in the Hebrew Bible. But in nearly every other situation, it's not translated as strength. It's translated as the word very or much. It's a word that's used as an adverb to amplify something else. So for instance, when it says that God looked at human beings for the first time and God calls them very good, that word very is the word miod. Again, we see this over and over again in the Bible, whether it's describing someone as very angry or very wealthy. The Hebrew word is miod. And so for generations, you've had some Hebrew scholars wrestling with, well, how do we translate miod into English when it appears in the Shema because it doesn't seem to fit grammatically? Love the Lord your God with all your miod. And so a way a lot of people have made it try to fit is to translate it then as strength or might. But more and more scholars have started to recognize what even some of the other ancient writers did with this particular passage, where they translate it as literally as possible so that it says, love the Lord your God with all your muchness. With all your muchness. And even though it sounds a bit odd, I've come to really like that phrase. Because instead of reading it through the filter of, I just don't have enough. I just don't have all that much. I guess I'm just not a very loving person, a very faithful person, and feeling like you're always failing falling short of some impossible standard. What if we understood it as, you know what? I'm going to love God and love others with whatever muchness I have in a particular moment. And sometimes that may be a lot. My tank may be full and it feels like I can return what I've been given. I can pay it forward. But then there's these other times when I'm drained and exhausted and it may not feel like I have anything left in the tank, yet whatever I have to give in that particular moment, I'll give. I'll give out of whatever muchness I have. You see, that's how life and love and generosity keep generating in the world, where we keep the loop and the cycle going, where we view our lives as recipients of grace and love from God, and then in return, we give back grace and love. Even when it's, I don't have a lot, but I can do this. Even when it's the smallest of steps toward love. When instead of choosing to ignore someone, you put down the phone and you make eye contact with someone and you give them your attention. Even when it's simply, well, you know what, I could post this comment in response to what they said on social media to make them feel small and inferior, to make them feel stupid, but I'm going to let that comment pass. Or even when it's, you know what, I'm wiped and exhausted and feel angry at the world, I can find a way to say thank you and show some gratitude for those who are patient with me and for the good that is going on around me, rather than just giving in to complete cynicism about everything. I may not have much, but with whatever muchness I have, I will take a step toward love. And that shift in understanding can have some potentially profound effects at how we look at ourselves and others. Because when we find ourselves rehearsing a story in our heads that constantly emphasizes that we're falling short of perfection, that we're falling short of what we should be, that affects our entire lives. That when we keep telling ourselves things like, I'm just not very loving, I'm not very kind, I'm not patient at all, what is that doing to every aspect of our mind, body, and spirit? But when we can reframe it differently and say, you know what, I will love with all of my muchness, with however much I have today, I can at least do that. What might that do to how we see ourselves? And to how we think about how God sees us? You see, one of the things we've done in our modern Western world is we've intertwined principles of capitalism with the Christian faith. For example, think about how the vast majority of us can perceive grades for kids in school, where even though the reality is that a C represents average, meaning that you're aligned with the majority of other students at your age, your place of development. For many of us, C has been translated as subpar, even failing in many people's minds. It's this way of thinking that promotes if you aren't elite all the time, if you aren't perfect, then you're falling way short of expectations. In fact, you're just failing, which is a frightening fallacy when you think about the stress and pressure and invalidation that induces. And then consider the implications of that when we take that same idea and we carry it over to faith, to how we assume God perceives us. It results in a religious shaming system. And the reality is we despise it when it's done to us. And yet because it's so ingrained deep into our patterns of thought, rather instinctively, we can find ourselves doing the very same thing to others. Consider this for a moment. If you were to ask people on a scale of 10 how accurate their worldview is, or perhaps maybe how healthy or mature their theology or their approach to faith is, most typically think of themselves as somewhere around like a 7, 8, or 9. Because after all, saying 10 would be too arrogant, right? But regardless of where we're at on the spectrum of, and for the sake of illustration, let's just use the words conservative or progressive. Regardless of where we're at on a particular spectrum, most of us would still claim ourselves to be like, hey, and based on my worldview, I think I'm kind of like a 7, 8, or 9. But when we think about others that we passionately disagree with, that we view as maybe immature or unhealthy in their perspective of world or faith, if we had to place them on the same scale, many of us will tend to place them more like a 2 or a 3 or a 4. Now, for what it's worth, some of us that think we're an 8 may actually very well be a 2. And those of us that we think of as 2s, they very well may be an 8, right? I mean, but that's not the point of all this. We all tend to overestimate our own opinions and look condescendingly toward those that don't agree with us, right? We all tend to do that. Rather, what I want us to focus on is how we view others. Writer and activist Peggy Campolo once offered a very helpful perspective when she said, we tend to view 2 as a contradiction to 8, but it's not. Rather, 2 is a part of 8. And as simple as that may be, that's been rather helpful to me because no one moves from 2 to 8 quickly. And it reminds me that even when I believe someone's perspective may be unloving and unjust, and while those perspectives indeed may very well need to be opposed and pushed against, if I can strive to maintain a posture where I see 2 as a part of 8, and 2 as having the capacity and potential to move to 3 and to 4 and so on, it provides me some traction against hate getting wedged deep into my own heart. It provides me some traction against falling into the same trap of dehumanizing others that I can find myself so angered with when others do it to me, do it to other people that I care about and align with or agree with. And the thing is, some days I have a lot of muchness for that. And other days I only have a little muchness. But whatever muchness to love I have that day, I want to show up with that. To love God, to love others with whatever muchness I have. Now, back to where we started, right? Here's the thing. When we rip this statement from Jesus about be perfect as God is perfect out of its context and tell ourselves a story that Jesus actually never handed us, we miss out on aiming for a good story rather than a perfect one. Because with perfection, when something isn't perfect, the story inside our head tells us that we failed. There must be something wrong with me. Again, that's what shame does. But you and I, we're invited not to strive for perfect, but for good. Because good is where the joy is. Good recognizes that life isn't static. It moves, it grows, it becomes. So you make a mistake, you screw up, you get knocked down. Okay, you get back up and you keep going. Good has room for that. Because good is about direction. Good is about where you're headed. It's about your heart. And good has room for flaws and missteps along the way. Whether you realize it or not, you're telling yourself a story. And that story is affecting literally every part of your life. And so why not start telling yourself a better story? Thousands of years ago, the Hebrew prophet Micah wrote these words. He has showed you, oh man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Does it say walk perfectly with your God? Instead, it says walk humbly. And just like good, humbly has a lot of room for missteps. A transparency and an honesty that we don't actually have it all down perfect. So friends, here's to being a people that discover joy in the good news of living in the perspective of good rather than perfect. And that we give ourselves the grace to show up with whatever muchness we have that particular moment to try and love well. Knowing that amount of muchness will very likely fluctuate up and down depending on the context of the moment and a variety of other factors. And that we can try to give that same grace to others. Allowing room to believe that others may be showing up with all the muchness they have as well based on their own context, upbringing, and life circumstances. And even though love still may require us to push against oppressive practices and injustices, we do the hard work of trying not to degrade and dehumanize people in the process. Trusting that the way of Jesus, the way of radical love, is still the best story to tell with the way we live our lives. Crosspointe, thanks for being you. You're loved.
How can I respond to the love that you have lavished on me? How can I respond to the love that you have lavished on me? I don't have much, I don't have much, but I have a heart that beats for you. I have a heart that beats for you. I don't have much, I don't have much, but I have a heart that beats for you. I have a heart that beats for you. How can I respond to the love that you have lavished on me? How can I respond to the love that you have lavished on me? I don't have much, I don't have much, but I have a heart that beats for you. I have a heart that beats for you. I don't have much, I don't have much, but I have a heart that beats for you. I have a heart that beats for you. Every part of me wants to love you like you've loved me, Lord. Every part of me wants to love you like you've loved me, Lord. I don't have much, I don't have much, but I have a heart that beats for you. I have a heart that beats for you. I don't have much, I don't have much, but I have a heart that beats for you. 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 I have a life I'll give to 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 you. I don't have much, I don't have much, but I have a heart that beats for you. I have a heart that beats for you. I don't have much, I don't have much, but I have a heart that beats for you. I have a heart that beats for you.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspointe, go to crosspoint.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspoint.org/care. And welcome home.